Is anyone like me where they overlook the most obvious moments where there is goodness and breakthrough in your life?
This is the Unleash Your Purpose podcast.
I am so much the individual and the leader that plows through. And as time has went on, as my leadership team has developed, I've noticed that they are very similar to me, that we like to move forward, take action, and we rev at a really high level. Recently, in the last several weeks, our work has been really, really stressful, and everyone is running 100 miles per hour, and it just feels like we can't catch our breath. I sat with my team a couple weeks ago and I wrote on my whiteboard, and before we started a meeting in our, we do EOS, it's Entrepreneurship Operating System, an L10 meeting. Before we did our L10 meeting, I said to everyone, I want everyone to think of their in obvious. So the word obvious, but I said the in obvious. And what I was thinking is like, what are the 5 things in our lives that are like aha, that are wow, things that I'm grateful for? And I gave everyone a white marker, and we wrote on the board, and I gave everyone a few minutes to write down 1 or 2 things that are personal, but several things that are work related. And some people had a hard time coming up with saying things, but some people said like a new lease where we could all, our office staff could all be together. Wrote as I got to film a podcast with my father-in-law and share that family legacy together, or having a conversation with somebody else. And we wrote down all of these things, and then we sat down as a leadership team and just stared at the board for a second. And I noticed that so often as leaders, we can kind of move so quickly and we forget the in the obvious. And fast forward this week, I come back to my office and there's been really hard news and very difficult things that we have to navigate. A loss that we may have to endure that is going to be a challenge. But as I walked in my office, I saw on my whiteboard, before I erased it and had to talk about the strategy of how to get through this difficult season, I looked at the and the obvious. All of these people's things that they're grateful for. And I just sat there for a moment and was like, wow, God really is good. And I looked down at the one that is personal for me, and it was about my son, Ricardo. The emotions of this young man who is now 13 years old, and the growth that I've seen him has been so profound, but if you're not looking closely, you may have overlooked it. He's lived with us for over a year, and when he came in to our home, our whole family has a joke that we always call him the NPC, non-player character, where it's like those guys in the video game that are like the robots or the avatars that just kind of walk around, where they don't really have a lot of emotion. This guy is the king of no emotion. For months, I could never see him smile. Getting him to say good morning was a 6-month feat, let alone when we did our family photos the first time, he had a death stare that if you zoom in, he is going to murder me. Everything in him is like, I will never show any emotions. When we go to give him a hug goodnight, his arms will be stuck to his side. As we fast forward now, I watch as this kid who was an NPC, now I watched his smile start to come out. As months go by, as we say, good night, son, and he'll say, good night. And then a few weeks later, good night, son. And then he says, good night, dad. Love you, son. Love you, son. Nothing. And I remember about 6 months ago, I said, love you, son. And this kid who his bedroom is by me, if I get a good night, that's a win. But I watched him come over, and I was laying on the couch just chilling out. And he came down and he came and hugged me, and he says, love you too, dad. And I could have burst out in tears. The in the obvious is so obvious at the end. The in the obvious, we always see at the end, but sometimes we miss that middle part of the story. The half smile, the moments when he gave me a hug, and when he really started to experience like the fullness of being a family. And just a few weeks ago, he got his adoption papers, and he was so excited, and he had the biggest smile on his face as he was signing his paperwork to be a Centers Forever. And then this weekend, I'm taking him to his tryouts to get on this new soccer team, and I got the call that he made the team. And I have never seen this kid talk more in my entire life than I did that day. The and obvious. The journey is sometimes long and not sexy, and you have to look really hard. But if you do, and I can pull myself away, it makes the hard moments, the days I have to go fight the battle at work, I can remember the why I'm doing all of this. And it's for those kids. It's for my son. It's for my son that's no longer an NPC, but he's just my boy who I love with everything I got. And my life is better because he is my son.
Thanks for joining us for the Unleash Your Purpose podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. We'll see you next week.